Meet Joe, a young tech founder and self-starter with a long history of entrepreneurial exploits to tell. Driven by uncontrollable compulsion to innovate and create solutions for the world around him, Joe's business competence is a genetic disposition with all the trappings and benefits of an ADD mind. His highly competitive nature, combined with the ability to hunt out great opportunity, has led him to a great number of varied business successes. No matter how many times he tried to work a 9-to-5, despite achieving great success, he was always drawn back to developing his own business opportunities through unconventional methods. After coming to the U.S. as a first-generation Jewish immigrant at the age of 6, Joe was so often frustrated by the limitations imposed on his life by having to constantly help his non-English speaking parents adapt to a highly technological English-speaking society. To put it in perspective, America was at the forefront of the information age in the 90s. His parents came from a farming background in India, which made their access or knowledge to this sector sparse or non-existent. Most things were foreign to them. His parents were low earners who worked 3 minimum wage jobs each to support the household. Joe knew at an early age that if he wanted anything, he had to find a way to get it for himself. From trading his lunch for Pokemon cards in elementary school to importing mobile phones from overseas to sell throughout junior high, Joe made sure he earned enough to fit in. To raise the capital for his first car at 16, as well as cover the other expenses he would incur in high school, Joe used his entrepreneurial spirit and management skills he developed from his experience of managing his household to host a wide array of tournaments. His peers always complained about there not being enough events in the community. Joe saw this as an opportunity to bring the community together and also help with his finances. Situations in which everyone can benefit are the opportunities Joe looks for when starting a business, and that belief has remained constant throughout his life. He would host anything his peers desired, including basketball, dodgeball, gaming, and even talent shows. He didn't want enough just to meet his ends. He has a strong desire to connect with others and really live life to the fullest. Joe built quite the network with all the people he would meet over time, and would develop a reputation as someone who got things done. Whatever Joe set his mind to, even silly things like video games, he would be nationally ranked. This reputation allowed for him to get others to believe in him and walk alongside him. He would use his leadership to start a basketball team, which would go on to win many national titles. He says learning to manage the egos of other talented people around him and making them come together for a common goal and seeing the results that it produced is what really inspired him to spend time developing people and push all kinds of boundaries with them. When it was time for him to further his education, Joe was unable to go with some of his friends to prestigious universities. Instead, having to go to a university that was within an hour of his parents' house due to their dependence on him. He would have to come home every weekend and help them out, while at the same time getting a job to help pay for his education. As a result, he had a rather unconventional schedule, so a normal job was out of the question for him. This led him to use his entrepreneurial spirit to start up a sports apparel business working with manufacturers in China, which he'd sell on college campuses to his peers. Since his business model was order-based, he had to supplement his income so that he was always earning. He used his prior experience in mobile phone sales to partner with a friend to start custom software and hardware modification services. Joe would handle sales while his friend would do the technical things. Eventually, his friend got a 9-to-5 job, so Joe learned the trade and continued alone. After successfully balancing school, work, and his household, Joe was finally able to receive his diploma. Joe was ready to put his fancy degree to good use, but there was one big problem. Joe's parents were not okay with him moving away for work. They wanted him to find work locally. Joe didn't have a lot of options nearby and wondered what the point of getting his degree was if he couldn't even put it to use. He tried to up the ante and do something on a larger scale than he'd done before, so he began wholesaling TVs and would sell locally for a time before sales started going dry. Joe's parents were frustrated that he didn't have a stable job and pushed him to get a 9-to-5. Joe reluctantly agreed and joined the stereotypical route that most millennials end up in, retail. He was employed by one of America's oldest department stores, Sears, where he worked the electronics department. Joe hails from Texas, so a large number of the customers were Hispanic. Hispanics didn't often get the same level of attention as other customers from his coworkers. Hispanics had a difficult time communicating, and, as a result, other associates thought they were missing out on sales because they worked on commission. Joe saw this as a huge opportunity, because it was a large customer base with spending power that was being passed on. Often, when selling to Hispanics, he was actually selling to children, since the children had to translate for their parents. This hit home for Joe, because Joe saw himself in them. His customers would often tell him that they'd come in on a previous day, when he wasn't working, to buy a television set, and ended up walking out because no one paid much attention to them. Joe would often give them his personal number and tell them to call him anytime they wanted to look at TVs, and he would come in, even if he wasn't working, and to pass on his number to all their friends. Joe was extremely successful with the minorities and shattered national sales records monthly, even selling close to $42,000 in inventory in one Black Friday sitting. He received Sears' highest sales honor, the Best of Blue Award, and he did all of this by using the concept of relationship selling taught to him by his university professor. Despite the success, Joe was unhappy after 5 months of working on someone else's terms. Joe couldn't deny his passion for building things and revolutionizing technology. He wanted to bridge the gap between tomorrow's technology and today's people. He wanted to end the struggle that immigrants had to go through to get things done. He took some time off to develop the concept of Updater, while getting educated on startup life by utilizing Stanford's eCorner Venture program. His parents saw this as a waste of time, as well as zero revenue being generated, so they continued to pressure him into getting a stable job. And so he tried consulting for a credit card processing company. It was his most boring job yet, because he would make appointments with business owners only to be sitting around in their waiting rooms. This constant waiting did not sit well with his ADD, and he eventually quit. The timing in which he quit could not have been any worse, because his mother lost her strength to continue working. She was riddled with old age and a body that needed some serious surgery. His parents needed him to contribute, and so he did, but finding the right job still eluded him. He began to go broke supporting his family, so as a last-ditch effort, his mother gave him all the money she had set aside for retirement. She wanted Joe to use his passion to start his company and create his own job. It was at that moment he knew he had to fully commit himself to Updater. Everything depended on him creating the software. Without Updater, the fate of the business, consumers, and his family would be left to chance. After all, he was someone who understood technology, spoke English well, and still ended up having difficulties. He knew the system is fundamentally broken, and no one was doing anything about it. He had to turn his frustration into innovation. So with $8 in cash and the support of his mother, he left for the Bay Area to finally begin the life he'd always dreamed of. To create software that would liberate billions of people and business owners alike, while using his salary to support his family. With his eyes set firmly on the bigger picture, Joe wants to create a platform where dreamers and make-believers can thrive. Joe is inspired by the teachings of Alan Watts, who says if you're interested in something, chances are someone else will be too. Somebody is always interested in everything. Hone your craft, become a master of it, and get a good fee for it. Joe wants Updater to empower people everywhere to share their craft and become entrepreneurs. And there's nothing he set out to do that he hasn't made a success of yet. He believes his past experiences will vouch for him, but doesn't feel that it needs to be a focal point. Because it's not what he's done that matters. It's what he's going to do.